Patagonia, a land of stark beauty and windswept desolation. My hunt hadn't led me here chasing monsters of tooth and claw, but echoes fainter, yet perhaps more profound. Whispers from a stone past. Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of Hands. Millennia-old imprints, a silent chorus from lost peoples, but a recurring symbol I'd found in my fragmented agency notes, one that mirrored some of the cave's stranger glyphs, suggested their interest here wasn't purely anthropological. I descended into the darkness not just to marvel at ancient art, but to uncover what forgotten knowledge the agency sought from these whispering walls, and why. Patagonia. The name itself conjured images of stark, windswept plains stretching to meet jagged, distant mountains, a land at the very edge of the world. My boots crunched on the gravelly soil, the air thin and carrying the scent of dry grasses and an ancient, undisturbed earth. This time, my hunt hadn't led me chasing monsters of tooth and claw, the kind that haunted the immediate nightmares of remote villages. Instead, I was drawn by echoes fainter, yet perhaps more profound. Whispers from a stone past, a silent invitation from millennia ago. Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of Hands. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, renowned for its extraordinary collection of prehistoric art, primarily the stenciled outlines of human hands, dating back thousands of years. Officially, my presence here was that of a keen amateur historian, a lone traveler, intrigued by Argentina's rich archaeological heritage. Unofficially, as always, the agency cast a long shadow, a recurring abstract symbol I'd painstakingly reconstructed from fragmented data in my recovered journals, a symbol the agency had flagged as priority omega interest, bore an uncanny resemblance to some of the more obscure pictographs reportedly found within the deeper, less accessible sections of this cave system. Their interests were never purely academic. After the brutal physicality and psychological assaults of Aokigahara and the Himalayas, the prospect of an investigation rooted in history and archaeology felt like a necessary change of pace, though I harbored no illusions that it would be without its own dangers. The agency didn't flag things priority omega without a compelling and usually unsettling reason. They weren't interested in cave paintings for their artistic merit. They were hunters of power, of forgotten knowledge, of anything that could be weaponized or controlled. My preparations had been thorough. Heavy-duty flashlights and backup batteries, durable climbing rope, a helmet equipped with a high-resolution camera, a comprehensive first aid kit tailored for remote environments, and my ever-present notebook. I'd also arranged to meet a local guide, an elderly man named Rafael, who had spent a lifetime exploring the canyons of the Pinturas River and knew Cueva de las Manos better than anyone alive, or so the sparse online forum suggested. Rafael was waiting for me at the desolate rendezvous point, a weathered rock outcrop overlooking the deep canyon where the cave was nestled. He was as gnarled and resilient as the Patagonian scrub, his eyes holding the wisdom of one who has spent a lifetime listening to the whispers of the wind and the stones. He regarded me with a calm, appraising gaze, his initial skepticism seemingly eased by my genuine interest in the history of the site, rather than just its tourist appeal. "The hands they speak, senor," he'd said, his voice raspy as we made our way down the steep, rocky path towards the cave entrance. But not everyone can hear their stories. As we approached the gaping maw of the main cave, a profound sense of antiquity washed over me. This wasn't just a geological formation. It was a sanctuary, a canvas, a silent testament to lives lived and stories told long before recorded history. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp stone and something else, something indefinably ancient. I descended into the darkness, not just to marvel at prehistoric art, but to uncover what forgotten knowledge the agency had sought from these whispering walls, and why their enigmatic symbol had drawn me to this remote corner of the earth. The stone past was calling, and I had to answer. The transition from the harsh Patagonian sunlight into the cool, profound darkness of Cueva de las Manos was abrupt and absolute. For a moment, I was enveloped in a blackness so complete it felt tangible, pressing in from all sides. My headlamp, when I switched it on, cut a sharp, focused beam into the gloom, revealing the immediate confines of the cave entrance. A sloping floor of packed earth and loose scree, and walls of rough, uneven rock. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint, earthy scent I'd noticed outside, now intensified, mingled with the mineral tang of wet stone. Raphael, moving with the unhurried, sure-footed gait of one intimately familiar with this subterranean world, led the way. His own lamp, an older, more battered model, cast a softer, wider glow. "Be careful, senor," he advised, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "The floor can be treacherous, especially after rains." My claustrophobia, a familiar, unwelcome guest, stirred faintly as we moved deeper, the ceiling sometimes dipping low enough to force me to stoop. But the burgeoning sense of awe, the sheer weight of history contained within these rock walls, largely overshadowed it. This was a different kind of confinement than the agency's sterile interrogation rooms or the crushing darkness of Awawakija's depths. This was a womb of ancient memory. And then, illuminated by the sweep of our lights, they appeared. Balolabo hachiniasaru fi teles aroloa. The hands. Hundreds of them. Stenciled outlines in vibrant reds, ochres, yellows, blacks, and whites, splashed across the rock face like a silent, frozen chorus. Left hands, mostly, stark against the lighter stone, their fingers splayed in a gesture that felt both personal and universal. It was breathtaking. For several minutes, I could only stare, the beam of my headlamp tracing the contours of these ancient imprints. Each one was a signature, a declaration. I was here, millennia ago. The Tehuelche people, and those who came before them, Raphael said softly, his voice imbued with a quiet reverence. They'd left their mark, their spirit, in this sacred place. 9,000 years, some say, maybe more. Beyond the iconic handprints, other images began to emerge as we ventured further. Stylized depictions of guanacos, the llama-like camelids native to Patagonia, often shown in dynamic hunting scenes. Rheas, the large, flightless birds of the plains, striding across the rock. Geometric patterns, zigzags, circles, and sun-like symbols, their meanings lost to time but their visual power undiminished. The artistry was remarkable, considering the primitive tools available. The pigments, derived from local minerals, had retained their vibrancy over countless centuries, protected by the cave's stable, dry environment. I ran my gloved fingers gently over a section of smooth rock near a cluster of hands, imagining the artist, their breath misting in the cool air, pressing their own hand against the stone, a spray of pigment blown through a bone tube, defining their presence for eternity. The deeper we went, the more complex the cave system became, branching into smaller galleries and narrower passages. Some areas required careful scrambling over fallen boulders or squeezing through tight openings. Water dripped persistently from unseen fissures in the ceiling, each drop echoing in the profound silence, a rhythmic counterpoint to our own movements. I began meticulously documenting everything with my helmet camera and still shots, paying particular attention to any unusual symbols or placements that might align with the fragmented agency data. The sheer volume of art was overwhelming. It was a library written in pigment on stone, its language one of symbols and shared human experience. But amidst this recognized historical treasure, I was looking for something more, something hidden, something that had specifically drawn the cold, calculating attention of my former employers. The darkness of Cueva de las Manos held many secrets, and I had only just begun to scratch the surface. The handprints dominated Cueva de las Manos, a silent, multi-generational conversation stretching back through unimaginable depths of time. As Raphael allowed me to explore a section of the main gallery on my own for a while, I found myself utterly captivated by them. They weren't just random daubings. There was an undeniable intentionality, a profound sense of communication. But what were they saying? I moved slowly along the rock face, the beam of my headlamp acting as a spotlight, isolating individual prints in small clusters. The majority were, as Raphael had said, left hands, created by spraying pigment over a hand pressed against the stone. Red, derived from hematite, was the most common color, followed by ochre, black from manganese oxide, and a striking white from kaolin. Some were small, clearly belonging to children, their tiny outlines a poignant reminder of the continuity of life within these ancient communities. Others were larger, broader, perhaps those of adult hunters or respected elders. Were they simply signatures, a way for individuals to leave an indelible mark, a claim of presence? Or was there a deeper, ritualistic significance? I recalled anthropological theories suggesting such handprints could be part of initiation rites, healing ceremonies, or shamanistic journeys into the spirit world. The sheer number of them, overlapping in places, suggested a practice repeated over many generations, a tradition passed down. My gaze was drawn to a particular panel where several black hands were interspersed with vibrant red guanaco figures, seemingly frozen in mid-leap. The juxtaposition felt deliberate. Was it a depiction of a successful hunt, the hunter's hands blessed or commemorated? Or something more symbolic? A representation of the vital connection between the people and the animals that sustained them? I pulled out my notebook, sketching some of the more distinct arrangements, noting the colors, the sizes, the proximity to other symbols. The abstract glyph I was chasing, the one from the agency's files, hadn't yet appeared, but I felt a growing conviction that the key to understanding its significance lay in understanding the broader visual language of this cave. In the profound silence, broken only by the drip of water and my own breathing, it was easy to let the imagination wander. The hands seemed to pulse faintly in the lamplight, almost as if they were trying to communicate, to whisper their ancient secrets across the millennia. A faint draft, originating from some unseen crevice, brushed my cheek, carrying with it the cool, earthy scent of the deep cave. For a moment, I could almost feel the presence of those who had stood here before me, their lives so different, yet their humanity so strikingly familiar through these simple, powerful imprints. I noticed subtle variations. Some hands were depicted with missing fingers or unusual markings, perhaps representing injuries, status, or specific individuals. Others were placed in hard-to-reach locations, high up on the wall or tucked into crevices, suggesting a deliberate effort, a special significance. It was these outliers, these deviations from the norm, that particularly intrigued me. They hinted at a deeper layer of meaning, a more complex code hidden within the apparent simplicity of the hand stencils. My scientific training urged me to look for patterns, for quantifiable data, but the artist, or perhaps the historian, in me, a part one rarely acknowledged, was more captivated by the sheer human expression. These weren't just archaeological artifacts. They were echoes of individual lives, of a community, of a way of understanding the world that was both alien and deeply resonant. The agency, I knew, wouldn't care about the art or the humanity. They would be looking for something they could exploit, a forgotten technology, a lost knowledge, a source of power. And I suspected the answers lay not in the common, but in the unique, the overlooked, the symbols that deviated from the chorus of whispering hands. Hours passed in the cool, subterranean twilight of Cueva de las Manos. Raphael had rejoined me, sharing his encyclopedic knowledge of the cave's various galleries and the generally accepted interpretations of the more common pictographs. He pointed out subtle details I might have missed, the depiction of hunting tools, the stylistic changes that indicated different artistic periods spanning thousands of years. His insights were invaluable, but the specific, abstract glyph from the agency's files remained elusive among the more prominent artwork. I felt a familiar prickle of frustration. Was this another dead end? Had the symbol merely been a misinterpretation, a coincidental resemblance noted by some overzealous agency analyst? Yet their priority omega designation rarely stemmed from whimsy. "Is this all of it, Raphael?" I asked, gesturing to the sprawling main galleries. "Are there no other sections, perhaps less accessible, less documented?" The old guide paused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "The main passages are well known, Senor, explored for decades. There are smaller fissures, of course, too tight for most, leading perhaps to small, empty chambers. Nothing of significance has been found in them for many years, but his eyes held a flicker of something else, a hint of an old memory, perhaps. There was one area, he continued slowly, far back, in what we call the Guanaco Gallery due to the density of those animal paintings. A section of the wall always seemed different, almost hollow when tapped, but the rockfall there is significant. It was deemed too unstable to explore further many years ago. My interest sharpened. Unstable or just difficult? Raphael shrugged. A bit of both. The official surveys marked it as a dead end, a collapse. But old tales among the local guides, some say it wasn't always a collapse. Some say it was deliberately sealed, long ago. Deliberately sealed. That resonated with the agency's methods of obscuring or protecting sites of interest. Can you show me this area? A look of concern crossed Raphael's face. It is not safe, senor, and likely there is nothing there but more rock. I'm willing to take that risk, I said, my voice firm. I have experience with unstable environments. That was an understatement. Reluctantly, Raphael agreed, leading me through a labyrinth of narrower passages, the famous handprints becoming sparser, replaced by more depictions of guanacos and enigmatic geometric shapes. Finally, we reached a section of the cave, where a massive jumble of fallen boulders choked a significant portion of the passage. It looked, as Raphael had described, like a natural collapse, but as I ran my hand along the rock face beside the blockage, my fingers, trained by countless searches in dark and confined spaces, detected something. A subtle draft. Faint, but undeniably there. And the acoustics were different here. When I tapped the wall, it returned a slightly more resonant, hollow sound than the solid rock elsewhere. Here, I said, my headlamp beam focused on a narrow gap between two massive, precariously balanced boulders, almost entirely obscured by smaller debris. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, and certainly not an officially recognized path. A few faded, almost invisible ochre lines, unlike the other paintings, seemed to point towards it, almost like ancient waymarkers. Raphael's eyes widened slightly. I have never seen that opening so clear. The debris must have shifted recently. Or someone cleared it just enough, I murmured, my mind racing. The agency? Or someone before them? This was it. The forgotten trail. The symbol I was hunting might not be on the main stage, but hidden in the wings. Ignoring Raphael's quiet words of caution about the instability, I began to carefully clear away some of the smaller, loose rocks, the thrill of potential discovery, and the familiar sense of impending danger coursing through me. The narrow gap between the boulders was a tight squeeze, scraping against my pack and helmet. Loose scree shifted underfoot with every movement, threatening to dislodge the precariously balanced rocks above. Raphael, despite his reservations, waited patiently on the other side of the main blockage, his headlamp a distant, reassuring beacon in the gloom. He understood the obsessive nature of a search, even if he didn't fully grasp mine. After several tense minutes of careful maneuvering, I emerged into a space that was immediately different. The air here was colder, stiller, with a peculiar, almost metallic scent I hadn't noticed in the main galleries. It wasn't a large chamber, perhaps no more than 20 feet across, roughly circular, the ceiling lower than in the main cave. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in sheer, breathtaking impact. My headlamp beam swept across the walls, and I let out an involuntary gasp. This was no ordinary section of Cueva de las Manos. The familiar stenciled hands were present, but they were fewer, almost overshadowed by a profusion of other, far more complex symbols. Intricate geometric patterns, spirals, concentric circles, and forms that looked disconcertingly like star charts or celestial maps covered every available surface. The artistry was finer, more deliberate than much of what I'd seen outside. The colors were deeper, richer, as if protected from the millennia by this hidden sanctum. And there, dominating one entire wall, was the glyph. The abstract symbol from the agency's fragmented files, the one that had drawn me across continents, was rendered here in a deep, vibrant crimson, larger and more detailed than any of the sketches I possessed. Seeing it in situ in this ancient hidden chamber sent a jolt through me, a mixture of triumph and profound unease. The agency had known. They, or someone they had gleaned information from, had known about this specific place, this specific symbol. In the center of the chamber, directly beneath the main glyph, was a low, flat-topped stone, almost like an altar. Its surface was worn smooth, and there were faint, almost imperceptible grooves etched into it, forming another, more complex geometric pattern. It felt purposeful. This wasn't just a gallery for art. It was a place of ritual, of focused intent. I moved closer, my boots crunching softly on the undisturbed dust of centuries. The silence in this chamber was absolute, a heavy, listening stillness that felt older than the rock itself. It was the kind of silence that made you acutely aware of your own heartbeat, your own breathing. I had the distinct, unnerving sensation of being an intruder in a place of immense, dormant power. As I examined the altar-like stone, my light caught a faint glint. Tucked into a small crevice at its base, almost invisible, was a small, dark object. My breath hitched. It was too regular, too modern to belong here. With trembling fingers, I reached for it. It was a data chip, no bigger than my thumbnail, of a Type 1 recognized instantly. Standard agency issue, though an older, more robust model designed for harsh field conditions. It was caked in fine dust, clearly having lain there for a very long time, perhaps decades. My mind reeled. The agency hadn't just known about this place, they had been here. Someone from the agency had stood in this very chamber, perhaps studying this very glyph, long before I was even born, or at least before my memory of them began. This secret chamber wasn't just a discovery, it was a cold, hard link to my own forgotten past and their enduring, shadowy operations. The air suddenly felt much colder. The discovery of the agency data chip in this ancient, hidden sanctuary sent a cascade of chilling implications through my mind. They hadn't just stumbled upon Cueva de las Manos, they had penetrated its deepest secrets, leaving their almost invisible spoor behind. The abstract glyph on the wall, the one that had been a priority Omega target, pulsed with a new, more sinister significance under the beam of my headlamp. I carefully pocketed the data chip, a potential treasure trove of information if I could ever find a way to access its contents safely, and turned my full attention back to the chamber's artwork. The intricate symbols surrounding the main glyph were unlike anything in the public galleries. They weren't just decorative. They felt like a language, a complex tapestry of interconnected ideas. My eyes traced the spirals that seemed to mimic galaxies, the lines that connected distinct clusters of dots like constellations, the concentric circles that could represent planetary orbits or cycles of time. My rudimentary knowledge of archaeoastronomy, a subject I'd briefly touched upon during my university days before the agency recruited me for my biological expertise, stirred within me. These weren't just random patterns, they were sophisticated, almost scientific representations. The central glyph itself was the most enigmatic. It was a complex amalgamation of geometric shapes, triangles, circles, and sharply angled lines, arranged in a non-symmetrical yet clearly deliberate pattern. It didn't resemble any known terrestrial animal or common mythological figure. It felt alien. Or perhaps, it depicted something far beyond the common understanding of the people who had painted it. A concept passed down, a vision recorded. I pulled out my notebook, sketching rapidly, trying to capture the essence of the glyph and its surrounding context. The altar-like stone beneath it, with its own etched grooves, seemed to align with certain points in the celestial patterns on the wall. Was this a map? A calendar? A diagram of some forgotten technology or natural phenomenon? The agency's interest suddenly became terrifyingly clear. They weren't hunting for art. They were hunting for knowledge, perhaps a lost science, a forgotten energy source, or a method of predicting or even influencing events based on these ancient celestial observations. The people who created this chamber weren't just primitive hunter-gatherers leaving handprints. They possessed a profound understanding of the cosmos, a wisdom that had somehow been lost or deliberately suppressed. A cold dread settled in my stomach. What if these symbols weren't just a passive record but instructions? What if they pointed to something the agency was trying to reactivate or control? The priority omega designation usually meant something of immense power or strategic importance. As I stared at the wall, trying to decipher the intricate dance of lines and dots, a faint tremor ran through the stone beneath my feet, almost imperceptible. It was followed by a soft, sifting sound from the narrow passage I'd used to enter. My heart lurched. This deep within the earth, even minor seismic activity could be catastrophic. The message from the stars, or whatever these ancient symbols represented, was profound. But the immediate message from the trembling rock was far more urgent. I had to get out, and I had to protect the knowledge I'd just glimpsed, both from the collapsing earth and from the shadowy organization that would undoubtedly stop at nothing to possess it. The silence of the chamber no longer felt ancient and dormant. It felt like the loaded pause before a storm. The second tremor was stronger, dislodging a cascade of dust and small pebbles from the ceiling of the secret chamber. The sifting sound from the narrow entrance passage grew louder, more insistent. There was no time to ponder the cosmic implications of the glyphs any further. Survival was paramount. Clutching my notebook and the precious agency data chip, I scrambled back towards the tight opening. The air was thick with dust, and the beam of my headlamp danced erratically as I navigated the confined space. The metallic tang I'd noticed earlier seemed stronger, now mixed with the dry, choking scent of disturbed earth. Reaching the main blockage of boulders, I yelled for Raphael. "Raphael, the cave is unstable. We need to get out now." His anxious reply came, muffled from the other side. "Signor, I hear it. The rocks are shifting." The passage I'd squeezed through earlier seemed even tighter now, the boulders having visibly settled. A fresh wave of claustrophobia washed over me, cold and sickening. But I fought it down. As I began to force my way through, a larger rock, dislodged from above by the tremors, crashed down, partially blocking the narrowest point of egress. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was trapped. Ill. Frantically, I pushed and pulled at the fallen rock, but it was too heavy, too awkwardly wedged. The tremors continued, each one a terrifying punctuation mark to my predicament. The thought of being buried alive in this ancient tomb, my discoveries lost with me, was a spur to desperate action. Then, from the other side, I heard Raphael's strained voice. "Senor Ryder, I am trying. I can see your light. Can you reach my hand?" A sliver of hope. I twisted, contorting my body, scraping my shoulder against the rough stone, and reached through the remaining gap. Our fingers brushed, then locked. Raphael, despite his age, possessed a wiry strength. He pulled, I pushed and writhed, and with a final, agonizing effort, accompanied by the grating sound of rock against rock, I was through, tumbling out onto the relatively safer side of the boulder fall, just as another, larger section of the passage behind me collapsed with a deafening roar. We didn't wait. We scrambled back through the main galleries of Cueva de las Manos, the distant rumble of settling rock a constant, menacing reminder of our narrow escape. The vibrant handprints on the walls seemed to watch us, silent witnesses to our frantic flight. As we neared the main entrance, the blessed sight of natural daylight filtering in, I noticed something that made me freeze. Half hidden in the shadows near a large stalagmite, almost invisible against the dark rock, was a modern, high-tech motion sensor, its tiny LED blinking faintly. It was new, recently placed, and unmistakably of agency design, a newer model than the data chip I'd found. They weren't just here in the distant past. They were here now. Or at least, their surveillance was. Bictazes Leopold, my blood ran cold. Had they been monitoring the cave? Had they detected my unauthorized entry into the secret chamber? The tremors, the collapse. Had it been purely natural, or had my intrusion, or perhaps their remote observation, triggered something? The price of the knowledge I'd glimpsed in that hidden chamber was suddenly much higher. It wasn't just about preserving ancient secrets from the ravages of time. It was about protecting them from a modern, ruthless organization that was clearly still active, still watching, still hunting. My discovery of the glyph and the old data chip was no longer a secret known only to me and the ghosts of this cave. The agency was aware, and they would be looking for what I had found. We stumbled out of Cueva de las Manos into the blinding Patagonian sunlight, gasping for fresh air, covered in dust and grime. The ground outside was blessedly still. The distant rumbles from within the cave system had subsided, leaving an uneasy silence in their wake. Raphael, pale but composed, leaned against a rock, offering a silent prayer of thanks. I, however, felt no such peace. The blinking LED of that agency motion sensor near the entrance was a burning image in my mind. My discoveries within the secret chamber, the celestial glyphs, the altar-like stone, the ancient data chip, were a monumental find, a potential key to understanding not only a lost chapter of human history, but also the specific, long-held obsessions of the agency. But the presence of that modern sensor transformed the nature of my find. It wasn't just an archaeological puzzle anymore. It was an active intelligence operation, and I had just blundered right into its periphery. Raphael, sensing my disquiet, looked at me with concern. "The spirits of the cave were angry today, Senor, but they allowed us to leave." I nodded, not wanting to alarm him further with my suspicions about a far more tangible and modern threat. "We were lucky, Raphael. Very lucky." As we made the arduous trek back from the canyon, my mind raced. The data chip I'd found was old, perhaps evidence of a past agency expedition that had located the chamber decades ago. Had they retrieved what they needed then? Or had their mission been interrupted, the chip lost, the knowledge incomplete? The new sensor suggested a renewed interest, or perhaps continuous, low-level monitoring. Were they waiting for something? Or someone? The implications were staggering. The ancient people who painted these walls might have possessed knowledge of celestial mechanics, of energies, of concepts far beyond what mainstream history attributed to them. And the agency, with its insatiable hunger for power, had clearly been trying to tap into that legacy for a very long time. Back at my rented vehicle, I thanked Raphael profusely, compensating him generously for his invaluable help and the danger I had inadvertently put him in. He accepted with quiet dignity, his eyes still holding a mixture of awe and unease from our experience. "The hands will remember you, Senor," he said, a cryptic farewell. As I drove away from the desolate beauty of Patagonia, Cueva de las Manos became more than just a historical site in my mind. It was a nexus point, a place where the deep past intersected with the dangerous present, where ancient wisdom was being hunted by modern ruthlessness. The intricate glyphs, the silent testament of the stenciled hands, were no longer just art. They were a potential blueprint, a dangerous secret. The old agency data chip was a tangible link. Accessing its contents would be risky, requiring specialized equipment and a secure location, far from the agency's prying eyes. But it was a risk I had to take. It might contain clues to what they had found, what they were still looking for, and perhaps even shed some light on my own forgotten role in their shadowy schemes. The enduring legacy of Cueva de las Manos wasn't just in the pigments on its walls, but in the dangerous knowledge it held, a knowledge that had now, once again, been brought to the edge of discovery. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the agency would not let it rest. My journey into the past had just set a collision course with my present,